Welcome to the first kind of Ocean series webinar between NUI and the Nature Tech Collective of the fall, essentially. We're almost already there. We're going to get started really soon. We're still letting people trickle in. We are recording this call, just heard. And I'll just go and introduce the Nature Tech Collective. So I'm Paige. I'm the community lead at the Nature Tech Collective. We are a member of an alliance of 180 organizations that are all committed to accelerating a nature positive future. And the way we help our members is by amplifying their work, by connecting them together, by creating sector intelligence and reports about different aspects of nature tech, and matchmaking as much as we can. So we've come out with, a number of reports and tools this year, and at some point you'll hear about them. But one of the things that we do, of course, is have small sub-communities around specific subjects, and ocean is such a crucial one. So I am so thankful for Amal for leading these webinars. I will let you now take stage.
Thank you, Paige. Welcome, everyone, wherever you're joining us from today. My name is Amal Ketata. I'm founder and CEO of NUI, Blue Finance Startup, which is also a member of Nature Tech Collective. And I coordinate a series of webinars and workshops focused on ocean tech. They're all recorded, and you can find them on our YouTube channel. And also, if you go on the NTC website, we have summary blogs about all the webinars. So today, I want to focus on marine carbon dioxide removal. The ocean is our superhero when it comes to fighting climate change. We won't get to net zero without both mitigation and adaptation efforts, and some, if not most, have to be at some point linked to the ocean, which represents 71% of our planet. There are different approaches to marine carbon dioxide removal, and Planetary has one of the most advanced ocean alkalinity enhancement programs out there. So today I'm really honored to be joined by Dr. Burt, who is VP Science and Product at Planetary, to present their work, talk about the advancements and challenges. Dr. Burt has over 10 years of experience as a chemical and biological oceanographer. He studied marine carbon cycling and ocean acidification as a PhD student at Dalhousie University, where he received both a 3-year Killam predoctoral scholarship and a Dalhousie President's Award. As a postdoctoral scholar, he studied marine biogeochemistry using state-of-the-art ocean optical techniques. In 2019, he began as a 10-year track faculty member in oceanography at University of Alaska Fairbanks. And during his 2 years in this role, he received over $1 million in externally funded research grants, including multi-year awards from NASA, the North Pacific Research Board, and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. It's a pleasure to have you, Will. So quickly, our agenda today, Will's going to present about his work with Planetary. Afterwards, we'll have discussion on some misconceptions about marine carbon dioxide removal and ocean alkalinity enhancement. And then we'll open the floor for audience Q&A. So please, if you have any questions, you can write them in the chat or raise your hand later when we open the floor to questions. And without further ado, please take it away, Will.
Great. Thanks, Amal. Thanks for the introduction and for that picture you had on the slide, slightly younger version of me than you're getting today, which is nice to see. But I'll just go ahead and share my screen. Is that coming through pretty well?
Perfect, yes.
Great. So I'm not going to be able to see a lot of faces, maybe a couple. I just panned through the list of attendees quickly. I'm really happy to see a lot of names I don't recognize. I've done presentations like this many times before, and typically the audience doesn't change a lot. So I'm really glad to see lots of people I don't recognize, and it's unclear to me exactly what level everybody's at. So I'm gonna opt to go high level here, and I'm gonna try and go through this as quickly as I can. I'm sure there'll be lots of things that I didn't touch on that folks are curious about, so hopefully we can address those in the Q&A. But without further ado, yeah, I'll speak to you about what ocean alkalinity enhancement is, how we do it at Planetary, and the progress we've sort of made, which is pretty astounding in this field. Whoops. Okay, so starting at the start here, why are we talking about carbon removal? Well, the IPCC has come out quite a long time ago now discussing how we don't get to net zero whether it's your city getting to net zero or your whole planet without carbon removal as a part of that. And you can see from this diagram that, emissions reduction has to be the major lever here in terms of, the solution to the climate crisis. But as time goes on, carbon removal is going to become increasingly critical, not only to get us to this net zero situation here, but also to take us beyond that and start, actively reducing the amount of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. Typically, people think about carbon removal in terms of things like trees and giant fans, like direct air capture. But I'm hoping by the end of this hour, you'll recognize that the oceans are really going to play the critical role here. So why? Why the ocean? I actually stole this idea from a couple of other colleagues. Dr. David Ho and Dr. Jamie Poulter gave a webinar about this recently and showed a Google Earth image of the ocean, which I had never thought to do before. So this is the Pacific Ocean, what you see here, and it covers the entire image. There's actually Hawaii in there somewhere, but you can't really see it. It's very small. It just sort of brings home how enormous the oceans are. They're already taking up a third of our greenhouse gases through natural processes of air sea flux, and we're going to leverage that natural sink in this case. But really, the point here is that the sort of contact area between the air and the ocean is absolutely enormous, and the volume of the ocean is absolutely enormous. So it's a very logical place to store excess carbon. And if you take all the excess CO2, so if you take us right back to pre-industrial, which is not what Planetary is aiming to do, but if you really take it that far, you're only changing the total carbon pool of the oceans by less than 1%. That's how much that this sort of thing could scale. It's kind of wild. So with that, folks are becoming more aware. So this is actually an image from NOAA, the agency in the US, and you can see how it ranks different types of carbon removal, both land and ocean, in terms of effectiveness. So in other words, scalability on the Y, and cost potential on the X. And you can see that despite the error bars, which is kind of what we have to figure out is how big can this get? Alkalinity enhancement is by far the logical choice here in terms of scalability and cost, sort of at a basic way of looking at it. Okay, so what are we even talking about here when it comes to ocean alkalinity enhancement? This is my favorite 101 slide. So the air and the ocean are sort of in a consistent equilibrium when it comes to carbon dioxide. CO2 can move freely between the two, but across the globe, on average, it's sort of in equilibrium. When you add a mineral antacid to the ocean, you are essentially neutralizing the acid that CO2 creates in the ocean. So CO2 in the ocean is a weak acid. you can neutralize that acid with an antacid, just like you do when you take a Rolaids tablet. So you are decreasing the acidity of the ocean and reducing the amount of CO2 in the water. And when you look at this visually, you can see how that creates what we would call a concentration gradient. So naturally, everything moves from high to low, and you get the situation where CO2 fluxes, would be the word, from air into the ocean naturally. And you end up with an ocean that is slightly less acidic, but has stored that CO2 as a what we call a bicarbonate ion. So that's the basic premise. It's obviously the chemistry behind that is a little bit more complicated, but the concept is fairly straightforward and based on some pretty fundamental chemistry. So that is why I got into this. So 3.5 years ago, I learned about ocean alkalinity enhancement as a professor and just could not believe I hadn't heard of it sooner. It sort of shocked me, and it immediately brought me into this wild new space. So I joined Planetary in late 2021, and at that point we were at the very beginning. We were doing tests in beakers at Dalhousie University as part of our first collaborative grant. In 2022, we came up with an MRV protocol and published that publicly on. In the meantime, was doing all kinds of experiments in the lab, also in sort of larger pool scale experiments, and also in small little, what we call mesocosms in the harbor, testing this out. We launched our field trial in 2023 and removed 100 tons of carbon. We scaled that to 500 tons of CO2 removal in 2024 and started delivering that to buyers via our MRV process. And now we're doing this through very, official means. We're delivering credits regularly. We have an offtake for credits. We're at the kiloton scale, and we've been recognized by the X Prize as a sustainable, leader in this field. So this is kind of wild to think how far this has come in less than 5 years, but this is the response to the urgency of the climate emergency. Okay, so what does this project look like? Here's a drone image of our little site in Halifax. It's very, very small. It's about the size of 2 shipping containers, and it has the capacity to remove more than 5 times the carbon as the world's largest DAC plant. While using this unit may not mean much to folks, but that's very little electricity. So that's a really important part of sustainable scaling. When you look at it like this, you can see what I mean. So this is essentially what the site looks like today. It's a couple of tanks and a shipping container on a spill berm. You add alkaline material to a mixing tank. With seawater, you mix it up and you dose it into a flowing pipe or outfall, which then flows into the ocean. So this is what it looks like in terms of it's right in the middle of Halifax as part of the infrastructure of the local power plant. And that little site is capable of doing about 25,000 tons of removal in a year. Comparing that to large DAC facilities, direct air capture facilities that are around 4,000 tons per year, and some of the ones that are scheduled, I believe, still to be built, that's what you're looking at when you're talking about a 20,000 ton facility versus what you're seeing here in Halifax. It's kind of shocking in terms of the scales. Okay, so what this is yielding is, or has already yielded, is about 1,700 tons of removals, backed up by lots of data that I'll show you in a moment. That information is then sent to a third-party verifier. In this case, it's called 350 Solutions. They go very, very deep on all the data that is sent, and the credits can't be verified until that is done. They then go on an accredited registry, which in this case is called the isometric registry, and those credits are taken by buyers and provide revenue to our company to keep this project alive, but also to fund all the research to advance the field, because there's not really anywhere else in the world where this kind of project is happening, and all the science can be built around that. Okay, so here's what all the data looks like. We've got moored sensors, so a platform very close to the dosing site that has sensors all over it. We have sensors that flow water through them that are stationed on the land to give continuous measurements of what's going on in your pipe where the alkalinity is being dosed into. And then we go out on boats and we take lots of samples, and we also leverage moored platforms that Dalhousie University has placed in the water close to our site. So this is a Google Earth image of Halifax Harbor, and there's a lot of activity, a lot of measurement going on around that point. I will go through this quickly, but here's some of the examples of the data coming through. So when you're dosing alkalinity into the ocean, the pH or the acidity level of the ocean goes, or sort of a hard way to describe it, but the pH goes up. So that's a reduction of alkalinity when you have a higher pH. So those gray bars are showing times when the dosing is on, and then you can see when the dosing is off, the pH returns back to its normal value, and it comes up again when the dosing is on. This increase of like 0.3 units of pH is within natural variability of just the tides and the winds and the seasons of this area. But you can see it's a very clear, measurable signal of deacidification. And the same goes when you think about this in terms of CO2. So when you're dosing alkalinity, the CO2 content of the water goes down by a measurable amount, and that's what I call creating the vacuum. So you're removing CO2 from the water and allowing that CO2 to flux in from the air. The sensors we have stationed on land are able to detect things like changes in pH and changes in suspended solids, and we can correct and change our operation based on that data in real time. I actually got an alert just this morning that one of these sensors was giving funky data. It's because I think there's probably some algae growing on the sensor, and one of our team members is down there now troubleshooting that to see, why it's giving those readings, and I think they've just now corrected it. So this is the kind of action we can take using software, using data platforms. Very cool. And then our boat-based data is really important. So we go out and we collect samples of the sediment, samples of the water, and we test for one important thing is dissolved metals. So levels of copper and lead in the sediments. Are we seeing any changes in that over time? If so, we may have to correct or halt our dosing. We don't see evidence of that, and that's really promising, but this is the kind of safety sampling that we do. A lot of this work is all online, so you can go find it on the isometric registry. Here's what the report is called that has a lot of this data in it. So what do we do to ensure ecological safety? First thing we do is follow the literature, and there is a lot of literature out there now. There's actually been about double the amount of published papers over the last 5 years. Every year, a doubling of research focused on ocean alkalinity. So reading that, following it, probably the most important thing is testing the feedstock, right? So we're adding a mineral feedstock. We need to know everything about that feedstock before it can go in the ocean, and testing it not only in terms of its chemistry and its any other impurities, but also testing it on organisms through like ecotoxicology and getting a really strong sense of when organisms react at what concentration to those feedstocks. We do all the monitoring I discussed before. We have these sensor systems set up to ensure our operations stay within permitted limits, and we collaborate like crazy with academics to look at all the other types of research in terms of positive impacts on oysters, for example, or what might be happening to phytoplankton near our site. So there's lots of really cool stuff happening. This slide is just to show you the way this now works. Now that we're delivering credits, we can put those credits online in the public domain. We can get feedback about them through solicited means, which is also happening right now. We can improve our processes by taking that feedback, and that's actually happening in terms of like dedicated surveys and certain types of sampling that we've initiated. Come up with new improvements, new learnings, new outcomes, and the cycle continues. So it's a pretty exciting spot that we're at now. Last slide here, just to show that community is a huge part of what we're doing. I'm very grateful that it's being led by Diana Phillip, who's an incredible actor in this space in terms of coming up with a very detailed approach. And so this idea, not just informing communities, but consulting with them, moving from that into involvement, collaboration, and ultimately empowerment. That is the sort of framework that we're operating under. Right now, we're very much in the collaboration stage for our Nova Scotia project, in that we've lots of different communities that are coming to the site, wanting to get involved in a significant way. We actually had an event recently that brought all those people into one place, and it was really incredible to see the breadth and depth of that community now that is involved locally and provincially in Nova Scotia. So there's a lot of positive momentum there, and it's absolutely critical. Okay, so this is real. We're delivering removals, permanent removals at the kiloton scale, which is pretty significant. It's pretty simple. It's built on fundamental chemistry. It's very scalable. And at this point, it's posing very minimal risk, and we're going to learn as we go and make sure that that remains the case. But importantly, we're advancing the field really quickly here by having these sort of first of a kind breakthroughs and by being really transparent and collaborative. Sorry if that was a bit long and fast, but that's all I have for you today.
Thank you very much, Will. This is very insightful, and also thanks for taking us with all the footage and images back to the facility to give us a clear idea of how things are working. I'm gonna share my screen. All right. So we have a few misconceptions. A lot of people here are not so familiar with ocean alkalinity enhancement, or are not really in the field to understand it well. So I've got a few misconceptions that I want to debunk with you. The first one is we hear, of marine CDR pathways like in one bucket, but actually there are many. Are they all similar?
Yeah, this is probably, it's good that it's number one. I think it's probably the most important one. And if anyone follows me on LinkedIn, they'll know that I talk about this all the time, because it's definitely the case that ocean alkalinity enhancement is lumped under marine CDR, when really the different ways you can, leverage the oceans to do carbon removal they're so vastly different. You can see from the slide I shared before that that they have very different cost and scalability metrics, which is a really important start point. But probably more importantly than everything, they have very different risk profiles in terms of ecosystem risk. And I mean, I'm biased because I'm a chemist, but the reason that I got into this particular approach is because it focuses solely on the chemistry, and thus, in my view, poses much fewer risks. Not zero, but much fewer risks to ecosystems, and that's really, really important.
Thanks, Will. The second misconception is that the ecological risks of marine CDR are still unknown. How much do we know? How much do we still don't know?
Yeah, well, I'm a scientist, right? So I am never happy. I always want to know more, and I think that's where we'll always be. But I think it's really important to recognize what we do know. Going back to what I mentioned before in terms of the rate at which we are learning in terms of peer-reviewed science. If you go through this huge trough of literature, you'll see that it is proving out the way we expected, in that, you do see changes to sort of microbial plankton communities when you add alkalinity, but that's to be expected because you're changing the conditions of the water. And but they're very, very small changes, and that's always what we expected, right? And a lot of the time, the changes that they're testing are actually really extreme relative to the changes we're actually inducing in the ocean. So all that to say, it's very, very positive at this point. And the really critical thing groups like Planetary have to do is diligently test the feedstocks, right? I mean, if you can put yeah, as long as you have a really strong sense of what is in this material and you keep really close tabs on the ocean and the effluent you're dosing into, I think you can be pretty confident in the ecological safety of what you're doing, as long as you're diligent and you're transparent about this stuff.
Great. We'll move to the next one. The ocean is an open system. Is measuring and monitoring carbon removal for marine carbon dioxide removal pathways too challenging?
This is another really good one. So, two things to say about it. One is that the fundamentals of ocean alkalinity enhancement are pretty solid. We know that the removal is happening and that it's permanent. We are now digging into the details, right? Exactly how much are you removing? And that will always be the goal, will be to reduce those uncertainties further and further and further. At the moment, we're at a point where we're taking a pretty conservative uncertainty adjustment. So we're actually crediting a lot less than what we could be because we're taking a pretty conservative approach. That's what these protocols sort of require at this point is that if you look deeper into the credits we're generating, we're taking this uncertainty discount at the end, which is pretty significant. So we're in a good place now, but of course we'll always have to improve. But an important one really good resource for this is a blog post. An image is taken on the left there. And it's important to note that open systems are more challenging for MRV, but that's because they're so scalable. Again, we're using the entire ocean to leverage, climate relevant action here. If we did this in a small box, it might be easier to do the MRV, but the goal here is the climate. And so it needs to be big, and that is why open systems are so powerful. So yes, they are challenging, but we're making great progress towards it, and the goal is big, and it should be.
Totally. Now let's move on to the topic of community engagement. Is a lack of social license likely to limit marine carbon dioxide removal approaches, including ocean alkalinity enhancement?
Yeah, it's an important topic to raise because it certainly can. But I would say the key to mitigating that risk is to have the kind of people in these companies like we have at Planetary, someone who's very thoughtful about the approach and puts all of their energy towards this exact topic. I used to split my time between science and community, which was a mistake. So now now we have the right people in place, and so we're having these positive outcomes in Nova Scotia, and that will provide positive momentum. If other projects come up behind us, and I know some are, which is great, from other companies, if they're taking the same kind of approach and have these kinds of outcomes, it will help in the future to build momentum and show that some of the misconceptions, in terms of some things about ecological safety are maybe not true, and we can prove that out as we end up with more and more of these projects online. So I like the trajectory we're on. That risk will always be there, and we'll just have to work hard.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. In all ocean-related pathways or projects, I think it's important, and I've heard it a lot, like in ocean discussions, it's important to find who are the communities that are that should be consulted and involved and engaged throughout the process, even if it's like in the open sea. In this case, it's a coastal project, so definitely there needs to be community engagement. Next one, what is the stance of regulators today? Are they reluctant to support the deployment of ocean alkalinity enhancement?
Yeah, so my experience on this is in Canada and in the US because that's where, well, and also in the UK, I guess we've had very positive experiences. Certainly in Canada, the sheer momentum now across provincial regulators, federal regulators, they want to see they see the benefits of this across not just the climate, but also economic benefits and things like that. And so they're more keen than ever to work with us on finding the right pathways. And in the US, they've sort of done something similar. They have made the EPA has made pathways quite clear for this kind of carbon removal for ocean alkalinity through permitted outfalls. It's a very positive approach. So I think in this case, I think we're in a good position. I think most people think that it's going to be a huge challenge, but in our case, I really don't think it is. Certainly, what we've got going in this part of the world is very promising.
Perfect. I've just shared in the chat the video from which this screenshot was taken, just from Canadian Senator. Last misconception. We saw in the announcement that there's a target to reach $50 per ton of CO2. Would scaling ocean alkalinity enhancement and reaching that price target take a lot of time and investment?
Yeah, that's funny. When I first saw this, I thought, well, yes, it will. But of course it's a question of how long. I do think that, this is the only option we have is to get to a very low cost quite quickly. So we have a $31 million credit offtake. So we've got customers ready to buy these credits, but they want to see cost reduction over time. So we've got a path in front of us in the next 5 years. It's not going to get us to $50 per ton, but it's going to get us pretty close in that time period. And you get the rest of the way there by through these sort of simple things. You've got a very simple process, like I've mentioned. You're leveraging a lot of existing infrastructure, which reduces cost and emissions. If you've co-located really effectively the alkalinity source and the point at which you're dosing it, your costs come dramatically down. And if you've got a low cost and low emission supply chain, and we're already seeing in Nova Scotia, people are saying, well, we need to get this supply chain sorted so that you guys can bring your costs down. So we're seeing collaboration now to make it greener, make it cheaper, and sort of work collaboratively across the region so that this industry can grow. So I think the path is in front of us. It's just a question of walking it at this point.
Great. Thank you so much, Will. So we're going to open the floor to the questions. And we have a first one from Sophia in the chat. Sophia, do you want to ask it or do you want me to read it? I can invite you to unmute yourself as well.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for going through the presentation. I was just surprised because many times blue carbon and coastal blue carbon, like mangroves or wetlands, are typically described as one of the best ways to remove carbon. And yeah, I just wondered why it would be in the lowest effectiveness. Is it just because of scale, in the sense of like, if there is a finite amount of wetlands that can be planted? Is that how you think about it? I don't know if you know, but just curious. And also, where did you get these from? It would be good to have the source.
Yeah, I think I think the source is in the slide deck, and maybe Amal can chuck it in the chat. But it comes from Noah. But yes, I think you're right. I think that the bulk of that is just simply that there's only so many square meters of wetland and mangrove. I think that it is still an open debate from what I've seen in the literature about how effective these systems are at storing. So that means despite the amount of space, it's also the magnitude of that removal it's a very complex system from the research that I've seen. But I think the bulk of it, yes, is simply that there's just unfortunately not a huge surface area there to expand.
Yeah, it's probably like linked to the areas, because this is the potential of the entire ecosystem or approach. So it's definitely reflecting how much we could remove using those ecosystems. And we will share a link when we when we follow up with a recording after this session. Andreas, you have a question, and I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Hey, thank you for letting me talk. Yeah, very, very cool talk. The last 2 weeks, I'm trying to get a lot into these marine carbon dioxide removal techniques and comparing them all for the limits and for the opportunities. And I think your method is very, very promising. But hey, we are some of us here are from a innovation venture builder and want to help with things. So what do you think are the 3 highest challenges right now you would like some other companies maybe to help you with to be even more successful?
Interesting question. My wish list, so to speak. So I think getting a few more field trials up and off the ground is going to be very important because we need more positive proof points. I think what we've done here is amazing. I do get a lot of questions about, well, is this really reproducible elsewhere? Now, Planetary has plans to expand across different project sites, but we are still a very small company. And so it's, fully launching another project is going to require, it's a lot for us. So having others come up behind us and show similar success is going to unlock a lot of the challenge I think we face right now. I do think there's like a buyer demand that we still need to work on. We are seeing quite a bit of improvement there in terms of folks can see that Planetary's sort of OAE approach is worth buying, but there's still not that many buyers out there. And so that part of that is on us to bring the cost down to where we can unlock more of those credit buyers. But that is still remains a challenge. And yeah, I don't know if I have a third one off the top of my head, but a lot of the challenges come from those misconceptions that we talked about. And so a big challenge I face is actually just communication, making sure that the scientific community is communicating effectively. So making sure the experiments are being done on realistic conditions, making sure we're being cautious but also confident in that we're not framing things as being unknown all the time. I think there's a lot more known than what a lot of literature and articles sort of suggest. So there's definitely a communication challenge that we have to address.
For sure, and there are always going to be some unknowns, right? Like just looking at the human body, we still don't know much, let alone the entire planet or the ocean ecosystems. I think we need to be comfortable moving forward with a certain level of known, because otherwise there's a larger cost of inaction today. Next question is from May. How about pronounce your name correctly? Are you able to unmute yourself? Yeah, please come to the stage.
Yeah, perfect pronunciation, like the month. Yeah, I have engineer technologist background, but yeah, really don't know very much about ocean alkalinity. So that was super insightful. Thank you very much for the talk. My question was, I guess, where does Planetary currently get its mineral feedstock? And on your slide about some of the challenges with scaling up, maybe you could speak to like your current supply chain and maybe how that might change, or you might see that might change trying to hit that $50 per ton target. Thanks.
Yeah. So it's a good question. If you start digging into all the reports on the registry, you'll see a lot more information. But the feedstock at this moment is coming from Spain. And right away you can think to yourself, well, that's a long way. And that's because, you know, the Halifax project was initially designed as a pilot, right? We just the goal here was to advance learning. And so the cost and emissions burden of a distant source was less important than getting off the ground and starting that learning. So the goal now is to bring that source closer. So obviously we've got some ideas and projects lined up for more localized sources. And it'll be not only bringing the source for this project closer, but launching new projects in areas closer to those sources. So that is, you know, wasn't the way we developed this initial project, but that's how we'll be developing our future ones.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Great. Andreas, did you have any follow-up question?
Just want to thank Will, but I realized I was muted again by my own stupidity. I always click mute. So everything fine. Thank you, Will.
Great. And then Phil, you're next.
Hi, thanks. So on the scaling, Will, you showed in one of your early slides the Pacific Ocean, which is all of Earth, right? Viewed from outer space.
Right.
Do you have to scale across the entire Pacific 20, 30 years out from now? And how would you possibly do that? You have 2 containers treating a few hectares. I don't see that scales any logically way across 15,000 miles of open ocean.
That's a good point. Yeah. So thanks for giving me the chance to clarify a little bit. So you're right. The treatment area that you can kind of see in the imagery is a very small region, but when you look at the scale at which the removal is happening, I mean, it's spanning across the open North Atlantic is where a good amount of that carbon removal is happening. So the way in which you scale this, there's a few different ways that you scale this. You can actually get to pretty much the climate relevant scale by replicating this kind of coastal plant at different coastal areas around the world. So you've got a lot of pipes with seawater or water flowing into the ocean all over the world. It's kind of staggering. There's been some published literature on that. And if you were to set up alkalinity addition into these existing pipes, you're already you're still adding at the coast, but that is dispersing away from the coast very rapidly. So the area of the ocean that you're impacting, so to speak, is actually quite vast. But yes, if you space these out across the coastal parts of the ocean, that's how you get pretty quickly towards very high scale. And then, you know, in the future, you can envision a world in which alkalinity is dispersed from the global fishing fleet. I think that's a long way off, but, you know, first things first, we can already get to very relevant scales just with these coastal projects. You have to remember the power of the coastal project is kind of the things we've already talked about, is that you've got a really strong community involvement. You can really diligently monitor. You can have a very low emissions footprint and low electricity. These things are all really beneficial for the coastal project, and those coastal projects really can scale.
Thank you. Next question.
Is that me, Amal?
That's you.
Hey, Will. Hey, I'm Gunther. Very nice to see this presentation. Super cool stuff today. You may see in the chat, I had a bit of a question more about the marketplace side of things. Specifically, like, you know, some questions about the credits that you brought to market, some of the challenges you might have experienced there, and in general, sort of your thoughts about the states of carbon, you know, biodiversity, whatever kinds of credits that are out there. Certainly one of my observations, I do some work with people on this, and it's like seeing the diversity of stuff that's out there with the changes that have come in, across those sort of markets. Like that's a big one. We have a lot of cool technical solutions, but there's still this selling it part, right? That's a big challenge. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that. And you can see some of the other questions in the chat there. But yeah, we really appreciate your insights.
Yeah, thanks. So I I will probably not, I'm not the best person to talk to about carbon markets. That is not my expertise, but I will speak to the challenges at being sort of the first over the line when it comes to delivering credits. I think that uh, is very much, what I spent a good part of my last year of my life wringing my hands over. So yeah, it was very challenging, mostly because um, you know we are complying with a very robust protocol, and we're the first ones to do that. So how exactly it's done was first of a kind, and that came with all kinds of challenges. But the partners, the scientists at groups like Isometric have been really great and working with us to make sure we're doing things in the right order, doing things as efficiently as we can. And then, of course, the verification, right? That was a new thing for us and new for the verifiers. So they hadn't done a verification on an ocean alkalinity enhancement project. So working through the kinks of that and sort of realizing how far you have to go. These verification processes, people use the term MRV all the time, but they don't often think about the V. They just constantly focus on the M of measurement. But the verification is a really big deal, and the work my team had to go through to get past that is really worth noting. But these are things that we're ironing out not only for ourselves, but for the rest of the field, and so hopefully this will speed things up going forward.
Great, thank you. We have a next question from Aise, asking you to unmute, otherwise I'm happy to read it. Okay, that's all right. I will read it. Thanks for the excellent talk. I'm curious about the side effects of increasing ocean alkalinity and how a phasing out of this project would look like.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the details about what side effects exist, I would point anyone towards some of the literature, and you'll get a sense of it there. The good thing about this type of project, and I show this in the data a little bit, right, is that you turn the dosing on and you can see the chemical effect, right? The deacidification, the lower CO2 in the ocean. And then when you turn it off, you see that effect, disappear pretty quickly, right? So in Halifax Harbor, we've already seen the fact that if we shut off dosing for maintenance or something like that for 3 to 5 days, the signal of what we've done is largely flushed out of Halifax Harbor. So there isn't really pardon me, like a phasing out per se. The idea, of course, is that these projects become just like a wastewater treatment plant, just continuously doing their thing and doing this sort of deacidification and carbon removal all over the world, and it just becomes normal, a normal part of our water treatment. That's how I see it going. There isn't that's the nice thing, is that there isn't really this big carryover effect in terms of the chemistry. And just to come back to Gunther's question in the past, I think one thing I forgot to mention about the credit market right now is that we are starting to see a shift. 2 or 3 years ago, I think a lot of buyers were really worried and thought that anything ocean was very risky because of the unknowns. Now, with credits, more and more buyers in place, I think it's starting to actually turn on its head, in that an ocean-based carbon removal is, given that it's very well known to be permanent, is actually very exciting for a company to be involved in. They want to. I mean, I'm not going to speak for them. I'm not a branding guy, but I think there's a brand benefit to being involved in the ocean, using the power of the ocean, leveraging natural processes. I think it really could turn in a positive way there. Sorry, I'll let Alberto go.
Thanks, Will. We've got another question from, we've got one from Alberto.
Hey, Will, thanks so much for the talk. Very nice. My question is, when you compare to open system, mCDR, although you don't share kind of the same design space, you do have an impact potentially on the biology of the system, right? For yourself in the company, how do you see that? What kind of role do you see like moving forward for like scaling in terms of assessment of that impact for your particular case in biology?
So just so I get your question, you're asking kind of how do I see the monitoring of this scaling with the rest of it? Like, is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, exactly. You think it will be like kind of integral part of your operation in terms of when you're scaling or deploying more pilots and growing, or you think it's gonna be is it relevant in terms for you for
Yeah. So absolutely, right. There's actually quite an interesting, it's not available yet, but it should be coming out very soon. There's sort of an ecological impacts framework that's been developed, not by Planetary, but it speaks to this idea of what needs to be done at the early stages and what does it look like as a project scales. And I think there there will probably quickly be developing sort of a playbook for this where you really have to focus on certain aspects early. And then as a project scales, you may be able to prove out that some things are not having an impact and some things need to be brought in and some things can be taken out. But I think the basic thing I would say is that the monitoring for effects would focus very locally. By the time this alkalinity signal is dispersed out of Halifax Harbor, for example, into the open ocean, the magnitudes of change are so small that you would have a hard time picking up even the chemical signals, let alone any sort of secondary biological signals. So if you can, and that's the good thing about a coastal project, you can put a lot of effort. We go out on a boat every 2 weeks and collect suites of samples. You can focus your effort locally and really get a strong sense of what's happening in that area. And because you're in a coastal system, you can do that without too much burden in terms of cost. And so it's feasible, and feasibility is really important. So I think that is how it will work. You have a small pilot, you have questions, you step up your game to answer those questions. Maybe some of those questions get answered, maybe some stay, and you will have to do some level of monitoring for a long period of time. And the good news is the technology for sensors and for autonomous vehicles will start to come online that are built just for purpose for this kind of thing, and it'll help bring cost burdens down as more and more projects get brought online. That's how I see it going. Let's hope. Thanks.
Hi, Will. Last question. So I'm super fascinated that this ocean, 70% of the Earth's surface, can take up so much carbon dioxide for us. And so land space is much more limited with all the forests and the good things we have. But mostly you rely on mining materials to do this alkaline enhancement, or do you see alternatives you can do when you are scaling up, which not rely so much on increased mining?
Yeah, so that's an important point to make is that what we are currently using as an alkaline feedstock is not mined for this purpose. Because if it were, the emissions with that mining would need to be accounted for, and it just wouldn't work from an emissions perspective. So what we are currently using is mineral feedstocks that are sitting on land as byproducts. So all around the world, there's actually, this is the kind of the cool thing. you can actually have a negative land burden through this process because you can clear away massive piles of alkaline material that is not quite at spec for the original purpose it was generated for. But as long as it's got the safe sort of ecological testing done on it, it could very well be used for alkalinity enhancement. So that there's a good start. I don't think we'll be able to. It will not work to ramp up mining to feed this industry. That's not a mechanism for success. I think in future there will be industries that crop up that generate low carbon lime, for example, for the purpose solely of OAE. You would have to account for all the emissions, but technology, I know of technology already being built. People are reaching out to us and say, hey, we got zero carbon lime. Can you dose that for us? And so we're talking about very low scales here, but people see the opportunity in this. So I think that is another pathway for scale. Yeah, scaling the mining industry is certainly not the pathway. That's for sure.
Okay, thank you. That's cool.
And that was the last question. Thank you, everyone, for your engagement, for your presence here. Thank you so much, Will, for sharing about your work and all your perspectives and answers. So we have this recorded. When it's available on YouTube, we'll send you a link via Luma where you have registered, and we'll also include a link to that metrics chart that Will showed us on the effectiveness and cost of different CDR pathways. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. If you're interested in Nature Tech Collective, Paige is your contact. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks for coming, folks. It's great to meet you all.
Thank you, Amal. Thank you, Will. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.